Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Henry Schein Dental Academy webinar series. My name is Adam, and I'll be your moderator. Our speaker today is Penny Reed. Penny is the Chief Solutions Officer with eAssist, and she'll be discussing revenue cycle management pipeline holes that might be haunting your dental practice. At any point during the webinar, we do encourage your participation. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A section of your control panel, and we'll answer them live at the end. Henry Schein is not offering CE credit for viewing or attending this presentation, live or on demand. And this webinar is sponsored by Henry Schein's Dental Business Institute, as well as eAssist Dental Solutions. Penny, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you, Adam. Wow, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. If it weren't for all of the licensing rules, we would be playing Thriller right now. So you can just think of the song Thriller in your head. We wanted to add a little fun because I know sometimes education can be a little monotonous. So we put a little Halloween theme in here. Kudos to our team for doing that to keep liven things up and keep it interesting. So let's advance here. Thank you, Adam, again for the introduction. As you guys glance at the screen, I would love to share with you a little bit about me and one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about dentists and their teams being successful. So prior to me becoming a consultant, originally I was in IT with a little company called Walmart. And then my dentist happened to be back in town and bumped into him, was at church with my parents and bumped into him. And he said, "Hey, now that you've moved back, I would love to talk with you." And I had an interview. That conversation turned into an interview and went to work for him, knew him and his family very, very well, and began to see firsthand some of the frustrations that dental practice owners and also office managers and administrators face. And there's not a lot that's more disheartening than working really hard and not getting paid or not getting paid what you should get paid. So very passionate about educating and coaching practices, and especially about this topic, right? Because this is the finish line. We've already done the work, and then we want to be sure that we're optimizing the revenue. So a little bit about eAssist. I've had the privilege of being on the eAssist team for right at a year. This is an anniversary month for me, and found out about them. I'll share a little bit more of that later from referring some of my own clients to them. So just a little bit more insight. For more than 10 years, we've been working to put more money back into the pocket of the nation's dentists. Actually, one of our co-founders was and is a practicing dentist, Dr. James Anderson, and he felt your pain. He feels your pain that you go through, and you work super hard and rely on all of you awesome administrative team members. And one of the things that we're finding, and we'll not to jump too far ahead, is that it's even tougher to find great people like those of you that are tuning in to do the work. So since the time that our inception, we have served over 2003 dental offices at any given rate. That's how many we have, and collected over, and this is staggering. Like I have to reread this stat, and you can always find it on our homepage. Every time I look at it, over $7 billion from insurance companies. We've seen a lot of things. A little bit more information about us. And there'll be information at the end of the program where you can find out more about us from Henry Schein. Our flagship service is dental billing. And I think you'll understand even more so why as we go through this program. We also provide patient billing. So we can handle that for you as well. And then we have just a suite of services that really complement the dental billing that we do for our practices. A couple of awards that we won makes me super proud to be part of eAssist. You can check these out. And again, just reiterating what we've collected and while we're shining a light on eAssist, before I dig more into the content, depending on what time zone you're in, I'm in the Eastern time zone. I always imagine, although our team members work at varying different times a day with the dental billing platform, that as you leave your practice, right, that lights are coming on around the country, computers are flipping on and remoting in through secure networks, and like a team of magical elves, right, they're working away to help you collect the dollars that you truly deserve. So in this evening's program or afternoon's program, wherever you may be, our primary learning objectives, we're going to identify the holes and haunts in your revenue cycle pipeline and cleanse the books. That's not a misspell. That would be like the books, that put a little ghost noise in there, and increase your practice profitability. And then setting the expectations and processes for your practice's revenue cycle paranormal. We want to help you reach new heights with that. And we'll be sharing some of our tips and tricks to do that as well. So we have a poll that we would love for you guys to participate in. And to your best knowledge, do you currently collect 100% of what is owed to you from every insurance company? So we'll let that hang out there. And if you would chime in, do you currently collect 100% of what you're owed from every insurance company? What a wonderful world that would be, right? That will be. So we'll leave that up here for another moment. And while you guys are voting, and I don't really have a slide for this, I just want to give you some perspective of where I've come from in my past years as a practice management coach. When you look at growing a practice and all of the time, effort, money, energy that you pour into growing it, from marketing, bringing on team members, making sure the phone's answered, appointments are scheduled, treatment plans, patients are evaluated, treatment plans are done. We actually do the work. The best way to work smarter, not harder, a lot of it begins with case acceptance. But when you really look at the efficiency piece, it's whether or not, if we're being super efficient and effective, then we are getting paid everything that we should rightfully get paid from the insurance companies and also from the patients. So if I could have my magical host put the numbers up, or if you would share those with me, Adam, where did we end up? Okay, here we go. So yes, we have 13% that feel that they do collect 100%. Way to go. And then occasionally, but not always, 42%. And then definitely not, almost half, 46%. So we want to do what we can to help you change that for sure. So here's what I want you to think about in the scenario that I mentioned earlier. What would it mean to you if you did collect 100% of what is rightfully owed to you by the insurance companies? And then if we could imagine a little deeper by our patients as well. So in a moment, I'll share with you a scenario of a little scary scenario of what missed revenue might look like. And again, what's even scarier when we think about those missed revenues, if depending on your role in the practice, if you're a business manager or if you're the practice owner, what's even scarier is that you've already paid the bills to produce that dentistry, right? So you've already paid the rent, the utilities, the team to be there. You've paid that lab bill, more than likely. You've paid for your supplies. You've paid, your payroll taxes. And so the primary place that this money is missing from, other than to cover those direct costs, even though you may have already paid them because you were going to pay more than likely your rent, your utilities, or your practice note, and your team to be there. It's your supply and your lab bill. And most importantly, it's the bottom line, which is the owner income. And if you have an incentive plan in your practice, it's potential rewards for the team. So that's pretty scary. What's even scarier is 70%. This was an article that was in, let's see, a dentistry IQ. 70% of dentists are leaving 9% of collectible revenue on the table each month. 70%. I found that shocking. I found that eerier than that eyeball that's looking at you. So 9% of that collectible revenue. And again, and I'll show you an example here. If you're familiar with what your practice collections are, and you're a business owner or a business administrator, those expenses have already been paid. So most of this would fall to profit sharing, potential bonuses, really what I would like to call it being a win-win. because you work so hard. And it seems like from the dental professionals that we work with and that we talk to, it's not easier to produce than it used to be. It's harder. COVID's added to that. PPOs continue to add to that. Shortage of finding talented team members continues to add to that. So 9% of collectible revenue. So if you ran the numbers, if you're not sure what your numbers are, if you looked at $1 million over 10 years, right? So if you had a practice that, if you're looking at almost 10% there, over 10 years, you're looking at over $1 million in missed revenue for work that you already did and supplies and lab bills that you already paid for. That breaks my heart. So let's take a look at a little bit more of the why here, and then we'll dive into the 4 most common revenue cycle pipeline holes. So not knowing where the holes are in your cash can be scary. And one of the things that I strongly recommend that you guys do, and you'll want to write this down, this is not on a slide. If you're not already reviewing your practice analytics, like whether it's through something like Jarvis, or if you have Dentrix, being sure that you're running your practice production and collection reports each month so that you can stay on top of this, right? And monitoring things. You may not even know that you're not winning, right? So let's go and dive a little deeper into what one of those holes is. Number one, inexperienced staff. There are training programs. I've been passionate about this for years as I've worked with practices. There are training programs and schools out there for dental assistants, and in many states, you can become a dental assistant without having to go through a school or training program. You can learn on the job, yet the schools still exist. So we have qualified individuals that are graduating from dental assisting programs and dental hygiene programs. Yet one of the most complicated areas in the practice, and it's gotten way more complicated than it was back when I worked in the dental practice, has become the insurance administration. Just to give you guys a hint, back when I worked, I remember when electronic claims first were a thing. I remember listening to the modem connect. Some of you probably have no idea what a modem is, and it would make that little squelching sound. And, then we could actually hear our claims being transmitted. So with the state of the workforce today, 62%, and this stat is actually from 2019, right? It was the most relevant current one that we can find. 62% of employers hire workers with less than the required experience. And in dentistry, one of the reasons why is exactly what I illustrated. Where do we go to find these dental team members that have graduated from a training program for the administrative area? Right? They just decided, hey, I want to go take this program. Most of them have learned on the job. And I would say a lot of what they've learned on the job may not be so great. And I'll illustrate this here with a story. One of the clients that I worked with for a couple of years, and then she kind of took a break and then came back. Her insurance and accounts receivable person retired. Great person. They retired. And we were looking, she said, I really want to find somebody with experience. So we looked and we plugged a couple of people in there, and they really were not a great fit. They either didn't gel with the rest of the team, or they came on board and they said, oh yeah, I know Dentrix and I can totally do this role. But then they came in and they really didn't know the role. So by the time that we really began to look at a different solution, their overall accounts receivable had grown to double what it really should have been. So they had about a net production of 100,000 a month, and their AR was over 200,000. And that was when, and this is how I learned about eAssist, that was when I said, you know what, let's keep looking. Right? I don't want to say that we don't keep looking. But this was several years ago when it was not quite so hard to find team members. In the meantime, why don't you reach out to eAssist and talk with them? And it was amazing what happened, especially if you took a 10,000-foot view and looked at their practice numbers as a coach, right? It made me look really good. But not only did we get the accounts receivable down, down to even a little bit less than 1 times what the net production was. You want to talk about happier patients that were not as confused about why they still owed a balance. And again, this was a great team. So it just reinforced for me, and made me even more of a believer of what can be done, not only if you outsource, but also when you get that under control. The doctor was less stressed. And for those of you that are not dentists, I know you know when your doctors are stressed, right? They're usually upfront, pacing, leaning over you. And we really want them focused on the patients, not having to focus on the accounts receivable. So let's look at experienced versus inexperienced. In today's market, experienced dental professionals are super hard to find, and they're very expensive, right? They're in demand. If you ever took any economics classes and you hear about supply and demand, that's why a lot of the fast food places are offering more money for employees. They're having a hard time finding them. So they may have their own dental billing processes that don't line up with your practice goals. I'll expound on that a little more in a moment. Inexperienced, and I will say for many of the roles in the dental practice, I'm a huge fan of hiring for personality, hiring for that warm voice on the phone, the person that's so interested in the patients and can remember all the details about them, the one that can really influence them on the phone to schedule or to keep that appointment. I'm all for spotting that person, right, in a retail store, in Starbucks, and saying, hey, if you're ever interested in a career in dentistry, we'd love to talk with you. To take someone like that and turn them into a dental biller, I've done it. It was not easy. I would liken it to the My Fair Lady, Henry Higgins, and Eliza Doolittle complicated, right? So it can be done. It is super difficult. The other is going back to the experienced. I probably overshare on some of my stories, but there's some favorite ones. And I hope that sometimes you can learn from other people's difficulties and you don't have to experience some of the same ones. I can remember beginning to work with a client. This client was in Georgia, and she had an office manager whose primary role was not only helping with some of the overall office administration, but filing the insurance, following up, and also the patient accounts receivable. And I remember this dentist saying, oh, this practice could not run without her, right? We'll call her Gertrude, even though that wasn't her name. If Gertrude was not here, I wouldn't even want to practice if Gertrude wasn't here. Well, we went through a series of training, and then that had come to an end, and they took a break for a little while. And then, I don't know, it was probably about a year later, the doctor called me back and she said, oh my goodness, Gertrude 2 weeks ago resigned. And my husband and I have found boxes of EOBs, some with checks attached to them, in the front office. And so even when we think that things are being done well, we still have to inspect what we expect. So that's one. It can be team training. The other is improper coding. And wow, I've sort of thought of myself, let's just say 2 to 3 years into my coaching career, as an expert on insurance. In retrospect, I really wasn't, but I thought I was. Part of the reason that I thought I was there were very few PPOs. This was 25 years ago. When I look, now I'm about the age of this little ghost flying around up here, but it was so much simpler back then. There were not so many exceptions and exclusions, and there weren't as many codes. And somehow we think that more codes means more payments. It doesn't always work that way. So tools to help you with this. One is we've got to have an awareness that those CDT codes, they're updated every year by the Code Maintenance Committee. And one thing that I would encourage you to do is to get with the business solutions team. There'll be contact information at the end of this session. One of the other companies that eAssist also has is the Practice Booster company. And so ask Henry Schein about Practice Booster, and also our coding and administration manuals, which are updated every year to reflect these codes. So sending claims with invalid or outdated codes can not only result in unnecessary delays in payments, it can result in denials. This is something that you really have to stay on top of, and it's not necessarily an easy thing to be knowledgeable of all of them, but also to stay on top of the coding changes and being sure that you have those reference materials, take courses related to the coding updates. The other thing that I wanted to mention is coding is a team sport. I'm always amazed that it primarily seems to be the office manager or the administrator that's taking these courses, yet the selection of the codes, uh, the documentation that we include, even knowing, which is more of the administration, it's driven from the clinical area. So what we see is a lot of the reasons why claims are sometimes denied or payments are slow is that maybe we didn't use the right code, or we didn't have the appropriate documentation in there. It's very much a team sport from the back to the front. And here's that information that I told you would be coming up. Feel free to take a screenshot of that. You can get information on those materials that I referenced, business solutions team at henryschein.com. Right. The other is, and I alluded to this earlier, is that sometimes we trust without verifying. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper into that. And that's sort of a two-pronged topic. One is trusting that the patient knows what their dental benefit plan is. And then also talking about the team members. I'm sure that it still happens, even though I haven't worked boots on the ground in a dental practice for many years. Patients that had the dental benefits card, right? They would walk into the office and they would plop that thing on the counter like it was an American Express card. Oh, well, I have dental benefits, as if to say you're in elementary school or high school and I've just presented you with my meal ticket. So number one, they don't know about their benefits. And if we thought it was complicated years ago when they got a little booklet, now they have to log into a portal. Most of them don't know what they have, and they may not realize when it changes. So there are definitely some things that we want to do, some best practices, both from the team side and also from the patient side, to be sure that we're aware. So when we look at what creates accounts receivable, right? What really are what do we want to call it? The precipitating events of the domino effect of those things piling up, both the outstanding insurance as well as the patient receivables. It comes from not having, number one, not being sure that the patient is still eligible, right? Sometimes that's an easy thing to find out. But also, what is the benefit information? And often we may get it, we may obtain it. Maybe we have a form that we use in the practice to verify benefits, yet it's not being accurately updated in the family file in the software. Let's just say, for example, in Dentrix or in Ascend or whatever software that you may have. So this will cause a claim to be denied if it's not caught before the claims are sent. And a typical office will usually have 2 or 3 issues like this every week. So what human nature is that we file the claims, right? And then when we get the information back, that's when we go back and we realize that we've made mistakes and different things like that. We want to be proactive instead of reactive. And one of the biggest reasons in coaching work with practices that I find that things like this are not done is we are shorthanded. We're busier than we've ever been. And we're so caught up in the urgent that we really can't make time or don't seem to be able to make time for the important. So being sure that those benefits are verified, that the patient still has that coverage and that they have benefits remaining. Because if we do a treatment plan based on inaccurate information, we tell the patient that they're covered. Well, now we have a trust issue. Now, the patient has a trust issue with us because we've given them information that wasn't necessarily accurate. So again, insurance verification, super important. Also something that eAssist does. It really must happen in the practice on a daily basis and have some systems in place to begin to do it. If we wait until the day of, it won't get done. So being sure that we're not counting on the patient to know more about their benefit plan than we do, and then doing our part to be sure that it's updated in the software. So if we were to come up with within this point, all right, the trust and verify, um, identify. So when your office is unaware of insurance details, the patient may be seen without active coverage, or a procedure is unexpectedly denied. So I'm going to give a little plug, and again, you can get with Henry Schein if you don't have a software or a patient relationship manager that will help you do this. The best time to get the patient's benefit information is before they come in. So especially for new patients, when trust is super important. So if you have a HIPAA compliant online portal for patients to be able to do this, and once they come into the office, if there's a kiosk, this is a belief of mine. I think that one of the biggest reasons that there's this disconnect in the practice is that the patients don't know what we have on file for them. And so we go through our routine, right? We ask them, well, have there been any changes in your dental benefits? And what do they say? No, right? Well, they don't know what's in the system. They may not remember. It's like, okay, well, did my husband's coverage change, or did I change my job since the last time I was in here? So they're answering yes or no most of the time, and we get frustrated with them, right? Because they don't know. Well, if they could see, like when you check in on a kiosk, and I'll use, for example, a medical example, not dental. If you've ever been to one of these nurse practitioner offices, let's just say Take Care Clinic, I think it's at Walgreens, and you check in, they have a kiosk. If you've ever been there before, that you type in your cell phone number or that identifier, and it finds you. It's like, okay, are you Penny Reed? And so you click on it, and it will show you what benefits are in there. Patients don't know what we have on file. So as technology advances, it will become simpler for us to do this, but this is huge. Number one, we often don't have, if it's an existing patient, we may not even have the right coverage in the system. Then they tell us when they get to the office, and then chaos ensues, right? Or we may find out midway through a hygiene appointment. We don't want to have a bottleneck, right? That the patient needs a treatment plan, and all of a sudden we found out that they have different coverage. So being sure that we're aware of the patient's benefits and that we have the most accurate information on file. Then the second would be verify. And again, the biggest reason that I see, and I'll be curious when we open it up for questions or the chat, if maybe you guys have some instances that I'm not aware of, it's time. We all know, like, this is not an Einstein thing that I'm sharing here with you, that we need to know the patient's benefits. Is it current? What's remaining? What's their coverage? We all know that. And yet the reason why in most practices it doesn't get done is because we don't have the manpower or the bandwidth to do it, right? So being sure that we can avoid as many of these scenarios as possible is super important. And then again, ensuring that not only that information that we get, that we obtain it, but that it's updated in the patient's file so that we can provide accurate treatment plans and better estimate those costs to the patients. And then the trust, right? Avoiding the frustration of collecting those additional payments from the patients. I'm a huge believer in signed financial agreements, right? If we just kind of step out of looking at everything that happens from the time that the claim is filed, right? Or even getting those dental benefits. So let's say, for example, that you decide internal protocol that any anticipated or any treatment plan that's $1,000 or greater, that you want to get a signed, not only a signed treatment plan, but you want to get a signed document or some sort of digi-sign that the patient, how they're going to pay for it, right? And that they agree to pay the full amount, and not only, what we're estimating that their insurance will pay. Well, if we get that signed agreement, even, if we do get it, the patients are a little bit frustrated, right? Even though we've told them that, especially if it's not a PPO, even though we've told them that they could very well have to pay that full amount. Yet we all know, we've been there, it's not a fun conversation. So anything that we can do to reduce that, And then also being sure when we're verifying coverage, knowing, keeping the payment tables updated, for example, on certain procedures. And I'll share with you, some of you are probably veterans to this, and you're going to say, okay, Penny Reed, this is old news. For many practices, it's not old news. So I want to share. What are some of the commonly missed areas that we find where insurance doesn't pay what we think they'll pay, right? One of them is composite fillings on posterior teeth. It's about as predictable as it can be that, let's say for most plans, they cover basic coverage is 80%. However, if they don't cover composites on posterior teeth, and we've treatment planned that, we know they're going to downgrade it to an amalgam fee, and we're still only collecting 20%, what's going to happen predictably every single time? The patient's going to owe more on those fillings, even if we tell them, right? We may verbally tell them. So we can go in most softwares and maneuver, all right, if these are composite fillings on posterior teeth, perhaps we look at what the average amalgam fee has been. Maybe we have the copay be 35% on those, right? So there are some things that we can do as a practice, right? Whether you're outsourcing to someone like us, or you've insourced and you're going to continue to do that in-house, that to reduce the amount of follow-up that we have to do and to work smarter. So let's go to number 4, tombstone number 4. Not to be confused with Mambo number 5. Yeah, I know. There's always a song going on in my head. Hopefully you're staying entertained and engaged. Is no follow-up process for the outstanding revenue. And I'd like to quote, I asked one of my dear friends, fellow practice management consultant, Deborah Englehart Nash. I love one of the things that she talks about when she actually talks about eAssist is she said, we want to be people-focused, more people-focused, less paperwork focused, right? So if we're more people-focused, less paperwork focused, this is something that we can outsource. So let's look at standards for insurance accounts receivable and patient accounts receivable. Ideally, for our insurance AR, all overdue insurance balances that are 30 days old or older should be analyzed and followed up on at least every 14 days. Okay, not just once, 14 days after that 30 days past due, but at least every 14 days to ensure regular cash flow to the practice. Back in the day before electronic claims, and that would be another thing that I would say, because sometimes I think we make assumptions. If you're not filing claims electronically and you're not sending electronic attachments, you're really missing out on a variety of things. Number one, a lot of claims that, or most claims now are auto adjudicated, meaning if it's electronic, if it's some fairly common things that are done, as long as it falls within the appropriate sequence. So let's say, for example, a recare visit, a periodic evaluation and a cleaning and bite wings, right? Some of those things just happen like clockwork. More complex things, we'll have someone look at them. If we mail something in, often it's not even going to the same place where the people are that review the claims. So by filing them electronically, you're not only getting them there faster, you have a tracking number, you can send electronic attachments. So be sure and being sure that even before the claim goes out the door, that we have the appropriate things there, and being sure that we're using electronic attachments as well as electronic claims. So setting the standard that every claim that's over 30 days is followed up on until it is paid, right? Ideally paid or appealed and appealed and appealed, and then we realize that it may not be paid every 14 days. Patient accounts receivable. If we have the appropriate, probably a completely different topic, right? If we have the appropriate financial conversations with the patients, the appropriate financial agreements and payment arrangements, we've been clear about what we anticipate insurance to pay. We're filing the full fee on the claim, even when it's a PPO contract, right? So not only that the insurance companies are aware of our fees, but we've got the maximum potential to get paid what we rightly should be paid for the insurance. but it's usually errors related to the insurance not having the right information or not having the right calculation. So these balances often have to be researched and re-verified. When we do, the patient's calling or they're emailing, I don't understand. Yes, I got my insurance explanation of benefits. I don't understand, right? And that's a customer relations issue and challenge. So it's usually not only not having the appropriate insurance information, but often how the EOBs are interpreted. Inaccurate ledger postings. Maybe it was posted to the wrong family member, to the wrong procedure, can definitely trigger those balances for patients and an awful lot of confusion. I love this quote. I'm a Mac person. I'm an Apple person. I love this quote from Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple. Companies get confused that think their goal is revenue or stock price or something like that. You have to focus on the things that lead to those. And again, to reference, I referenced it earlier, not necessarily from the appropriate person, Stephen Covey. When I think about mastering the insurance dental billing process and receivables, I think about mastering what is both important and may sometimes be urgent, right? But not living in that whole urgency quadrant, which we find ourselves in a lot in the dental practice. So we want to do the appropriate things while it's important and before it becomes a crisis. And for me, and my thoughts about you guys that have tuned in, if the national average, so it would probably be safe to say for this audience, it is 9% of what we're not getting in collectible production, right? In that net production. And even when we did the poll, there was less than 15% that said they felt like they were getting that. So once again, that hurts my heart. You guys are working super hard. You're especially working super hard today because you worked all day and now you're doing continuing education. So we should be collecting in the dental practice a minimum of 98% of our net production overall. And of course, we have many clients that it's 99%, it's 100%, right? But a minimum of the 98% of collectible production. And that will help us keep that AR net production to accounts receivable ratio of our AR is not going to be more than 1 times our net production, right? It becomes unmanageable. And also the older the balances get, the less grateful, right? The less presence of mind that the patient has for that deliverable that they got. And I've had some crazy, wacky stories that I've heard of. Once you've delivered the dentistry, you can't take it back, right? That will be the best thing to say. So if we really think about focus, you need more eyes on your revenue. You probably feel like you need more hands and everything else, right? But focus is the name of the game. And the patients come first, right? So patients first, people work over paperwork, yet we've got to be sure. And for those of you that are keeping things insourced, you've got to have dedicated time to be able to work on this. For those of you that have looked and you've not found somebody that's a great fit and you're thinking, hey, maybe I'm ready to not have to be so worried or concerned about that these things are happening properly. And I'm going to raise my standards because we work too hard to not collect what we need to collect. We don't want to leave any more of that money on the table. So if you would like to learn, we're launching a poll here. If you'd like to learn how eAssist can help you exercise, get it, your revenue cycle management HOTS, this will not be something that I will share publicly, but if you would just sort of let us know telepathically, right? Just like Halloween, like a spooky movie. We would love to know your level of interest, and I am really looking forward to, hopefully I've answered a lot of the questions that you had tonight. And if you have others, hopefully you put those in the Q&A or in the chat. All right. If you would go ahead, Adam, and close that poll.
I'm going to leave it open a little longer because people
Oh,
are still
okay. All
responding.
right. So Adam's going to leave the poll open a little bit longer. Awesome. So we'll have him leave that poll open. And I would love to answer any questions that you guys may have. Happy to help if you need clarification on any of the points that I made, or maybe something else nearby related to that.
Excellent. We've got a couple here. The first one is, what can you do when insurance wants money back for a case they paid for 5 years ago and was pre-authorized? And by the way, the office was closed 4 years ago.
Wow. That 5 years ago sounds to me like it's a little bit beyond, depends on, I'm assuming that this may be a PPO. I don't know. Sadly, the first thing that I can say is a pre-authorization is not necessarily a guarantee of payment. And I'm not saying don't ever do them. I would appeal that. Absolutely. I would send them the copy of the pre-authorization. And if it were me, whomever this patient is, especially if they still work for that same company, I would have the patient get with their human resources office to help lobby for that. That is, every day I hear stories from dental offices and dental team members. That's pretty extraordinary that for something that was that long ago and was pre-authorized. So I would dispute it, send the pre-authorization back to the insurance company. And I would also arm the patient with that same information and see if they can get somewhere with human resources. That is definitely something that I would include in like a bizarre claim story for sure.
Can you verify if eAssist does insurance verification?
Absolutely, we do. We do several different levels depending on how customized that you want. So we have a basic, which is we verify the benefits, and we get a form to you that's on your desktop, and all the way up to, we will actually put the information exactly where it needs to be in your system so that the claims can be appropriately filed and processed.
I have tried something similar to eAssist. My experience was not great. They had inexperienced people doing the job. How is eAssist different from other companies out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, just like you, we face many of the same challenges in finding great people. One of the things that appealed to me, and hopefully for this question, you won't mind, I'll preface it with a little bit of a story. When I first heard of eAssist, probably 5 years ago, I had a client ask me about it, and I thought, how can you outsource something like this? Right? I was kind of just thinking in my little realm of experience, right? You would want somebody in the practice that knows all the patients. And then, to my surprise, another client had been using eAssist for over a year. And this is a dentist who also occasionally lectures. We were doing a program together, and he is in a small town in Mississippi. And he said there was nobody to fill this role. My person that retired had been here for 14 years. So as I began to explore and learn more, I met one of the co-founders at the event that I did with him, and I can remember her telling me this then. And then, of course, I learned it firsthand once I came on board. We have a vetting process that not only requires a written test on dental billing to test the knowledge. We also do a human relations interview as well, right? Because our team functions as a virtual member of your team. So we have a lot of processes in place, a lot of metrics in place to measure quality. And we are your partner. We start with a kickoff call. We get a team assigned to you that knows your software. And we work with you to be sure that we're not only following our standards, but also that we have an understanding of what your expectations are and fulfilling those. So as far as the going back to the beginning of the question, it really begins with our vetting process, and that only about 20% of the dental billers that take our test actually pass the dental billing part of it. So I do want to say, I feel for you. It's painful when you have an experience like that, whether it's a company that you've tried to outsource to or an individual on the team that, on your own team, right, that you brought in that had experience and maybe didn't fulfill those expectations. So we have a lot of processes in place. We have a customer experience team where we're doing anonymous, not want to say anonymous, but random surveys. And then we're always checking NPS scores because our goal, again, is to be your partner and to solve this problem for you.
All right. Are there any other questions out there? We do have some time left. Any closing thoughts, Penny? In the meantime?
Yeah. And I just want to encourage you guys because I know outsourcing to someone like eAssist is obviously a right answer for many on this call. And so if you do have any questions related to the processes in the practice, from that financial agreement standpoint, and I'll just spend a little bit of time on that. And then if you have any questions around what I'm mentioning now, or if you think of any other dental billing questions, I'll be happy to answer those. The first step comes in everyone on the team being aware when, and I use that example of having that dollar amount that I usually refer to it as a floor limit. And each practice choosing what that amount is on their own. So maybe it's $1,000 and almost having an internal flow chart, right? To say, okay, if it's treatment that's $1,000 or greater, then they go to Betty, right? Who maybe has a private office, and Betty is having a more private discussion with them, going over things in greater detail. But if it's less than $1,000, right? So maybe it's a couple of composite fillings to keep the flow going in the office, that those patients actually are routed to the front counter. So not that we're not having a treatment plan signed, because we want to do that for everyone. Yet from the standpoint of managing the traffic and the flow in the office, also being sure that we have clear communication. If you guys are like me, the more money that I invest in something, the higher my expectation level is, right? So for the patients that do have that 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 treatment plan, they're really counting on us and trusting us to not only give them accurate information as far as what their insurance will pay, but we also, in trying to manage the entire revenue cycle, we need to be sure that we've made it clear to them what the expectations are, right? We don't want to have a protocol in our practice where we say, oh, we just bill everything to the insurance and then we send you a statement, because we're not setting ourselves up for success. So to minimize the friction that you may have with patients regarding their balance, and to keep your revenue cycle management to really get it started off right, in addition to the dental billing component, really having some great processes in place, having patient financing options in place. And if you think about it, dentistry is not cheap, right? You may think it is sometimes if you see what some of the reimbursements are with PPOs, right? But it's not, it's an investment. And when you compare it to, let's just say, for example, a car, we want to have simple, easy options for patients that maybe can't pay in full their estimated portion. So would just love to share those tips for closing up the gaps in your revenue cycle management processes. So hopefully that helped, Adam. Have there been any other questions or comments?
That did help. We got 2 more questions.
Sweet.
All right. Does eAssist do account audits?
Yes, we do. We do account audits. We can do a lot of special projects, but absolutely, we do account audits. And we also really work. And one of the things that I didn't have a slide for, and I was, often as presenters, we use those slides like bumpers in bowling, right? Keep the ball going down the middle. Sending out clean claims is super important. And by that, and I referenced it, but I didn't necessarily call it that. A clean claim is if we know that it's a procedure that needs a narrative, is there one in there? Right? We go back through the clinical notes. So in some ways, we're auditing all the time. Yet, if there were a specific need for a practice, a special project where there were some audits needed, absolutely. We also, just on that note, since you asked that question, it made me think of something else. And these other add-on services that we have really were offspring from doing dental billing for offices. Clients would say, "Oh, wow, this is awesome. Can you also do insurance verification? Can you also do EFT reconciliation?" Ooh, if for some of you, you may think, okay, please don't even speak those words because it can be painful. But reconciling those bulk EFT payments, if you have an accountant that is tearing their hair out all the time, right, to say, okay, help us. Number one, we need to be sure that these are appropriately entered, but help us reconcile these in QuickBooks. We also have dental EFT reconciliation and dental accounting with QuickBooks. So if you, and I don't want to use the term set it and forget it, because I think other than maybe a setting on your crock pot or your washer or dryer, that oversimplifies things. Because again, we're part of your team. We work virtually with you. We're really want to give you peace of mind, and at the same time keep you informed and be sure that we're doing things that you want them done. Yet if you want to be updated, we have a level of accountability with our reporting that is really second to none. As a coach, I loved it. It was way more detailed. I knew more of what was going on. So can we do audits? Absolutely. If you are looking for bookkeeping, hey, I want a bookkeeper that understands dentistry, we have those too. So hopefully that answered your question.
What about reconciling payments with claims?
Yes. So we will do, when we do dental billing. That's a great question. We actually post the payments for you. So again, think of us as remote team members, right? So we file the claims, we make sure that the appropriate things are attached with the dental billing. We follow up on them. When we receive payment, we post the payments or the non-payments, all of it, to your system, so that it's basically it's done. And we are again posting them to the those bulk payments to the appropriate accounts. And then we can also, if you want, do the EFT reconciliation.
And the last question I'm seeing
They
is it true
probably
that you
want to
can
know what I'm having for dinner. And the answer would be, I don't know. All right, go ahead.
that is not the question.
Okay. Well, I just thought just for fun.
Is it true that you can charge UCR when patients have dual coverage?
Okay. So let's say this. You should always bill the full fee on your claim. So UCR, usual, customary, and reasonable. And here's another thing that I love is that the American Dental Association trying to help us out, right? They define these on their website. UCR is based on whatever the company bought for the dental plan, right? So what's usual, customary, and reasonable for, and I'm just going to make up some plan names for the banana plan, right? They may say, okay, well, UCR in your area for a crown is $800, right? Well, for the peach plan in the same area, it's $700, right? So it's not necessarily only location specific, it's plan specific. It's based on the dollars that company chose on their menu of options for their dental plan. So there's the full fee is what should be charged. In many cases, not every case, and a lot of this is state to state specific, based on what the rules are. Many times the EOB will tell you what is collectible. So you file the primary, and then you make sure that when you file the secondary that you've got the primary EOB with it. But they both should state what the full fee is on the claim. And then, for example, I would get with your dental software company, because often for PPOs, right, you can have a setting where the full fee goes out on the claim, and then the PPO fee is what goes on the ledger. So I hope I answered that question. But UCR, and there was a really interesting, if you want to Google it, Fair Health, which is one of the many databases for fees. I believe they were involved in they were referenced, not involved. They were referenced in a case regarding, where a judge said, okay, well, what is UCR, right? And the judge in this case ruled that for this situation, they picked an independent entity for that, right? So just remember, UCR is according to the terms of the plan and not necessarily set in stone. And each plan, you would have to look at not only the plan contract, but also what the laws are in that state to know if you have any wiggle room if you're in a PPO contract other than what they're telling you that they'll pay. But in most cases, the EOB is the first place to start in looking at the allowable amount and where it says patient pays. But you always want to file the full fee on the secondary and include the primary EOB.
All right. Thank you very much. That filled the time.
You're welcome. Boy, if that didn't work up an appetite for everybody, I don't know what would.
Well, thank you, Penny, for a terrific presentation. And of course, thank you to eAssist as well for sponsoring tonight. We did record this webinar, so that'll be sent out to everyone within 1 week of today. So keep a lookout for that. And lastly, if there are any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to the eAssist team, or you can always email us at webinars@henryschein.com. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a great night.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.